As Trump is facing unusual blame from many in his party after the midterms, his former Vice President Mike Pence is using it as a "I told you so" moment. The Wall Street Journal has just published an excerpt from Pence's forthcoming book detailing his final days with Trump and what happened behind the scenes on January 6th. 5 days after the attack, when Trump had essentially called Pence a coward, though it was more explicit than that, Pence says that Trump asked him how he was doing. Pence reminded him he was with his family when he was inside the Capitol as it was being attacked. Trump acted as if he had just learned about that, asking Pence if he had been, quote, scared. Pence responded, no, not scared, angry. Of course, remember, Trump never called Pence that day to check on him. An aide later testified Trump had actually approved of those Hang Mike Pence chants. Pence writes in his new book, quote, President Trump retweeted an obscure article titled Operation Pence Card. It alluded to the theory that if all else failed, I could alter the outcome of the election on January 6th. I showed it to my wife, Karen, and rolled my eyes. Keep in mind, on New Year's Day, Trump called Pence about a lawsuit that had been filed by Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert aimed at forcing Pence to help overturn the election. Pence says that Trump told him, quote, I don't want to see Pence opposes Gohmert suit as a headline this morning. But Pence says he told Trump he did oppose it. Trump responded, quote, you're too honest. Hundreds of thousands are going to hate your guts. People are going to think you're stupid. Pence goes on to write that he challenged Trump's attorney, John Eastman, 2 days before January 6 actually happened, saying Eastman didn't even believe his own advice he was giving Trump. Pence writes, quote, I turned to the president and said, Mr. President, did you hear that? Even your own lawyer doesn't think I have the authority to return electoral votes. Then, on the eve of the insurrection, Pence says, quote, I had a feeling January 6, 2021 was going to be a very long day. Of course, we all know what happened next. Pence was rushed to safety as rioters broke in, looking for him personally. Pence told his Secret Service agents at the time, quote, I'm not leaving. I'm not giving those people the sight of a 16-car motorcade speeding away from the Capitol. Pence writes, quote, I heard footsteps and angry chanting. Making our way to the basement of the Capitol took a few extra minutes because I insisted that we walk, not run. As they were hiding from the rioters, an assistant to Pence showed him what Trump had tweeted right in the middle of that attack. Trump said, quote, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. Pence writes he ignored the tweet and got back to work. 8 days later, Pence says he stopped by the Oval Office and that the night before Trump had, quote, unequivocally denounced the violence at the Capitol. Pence congratulated him on his address and Trump said, I knew you'd like it. Pence writes that he seemed discouraged, so I reminded him that I was praying for him. Trump's response? Don't bother. Pence's book comes out on Tuesday. That's the same day Trump has promised to make an announcement at Mar-a-Lago teasing a presidential run. Pence is also scheduled to participate in a CNN town hall on Wednesday. So joining us now, who better to discuss, Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. David Urban, you had a fascinating quote yesterday that I want to read about what happened. You said, talking about the Republican anger effort on Tuesday, you said, quote, it's clear the center of gravity of the Republican Party is in the state of Florida, and I don't mean Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's the elephant in the room, right? Ron DeSantis crushes in the state of Florida, builds an incredible coalition that can be, if he could replicate it nationwide, would be very formidable. And so I think, if you're a Republican in America today and you're looking at having a Lincoln Day dinner and you're looking for a speaker, it's not going to be Donald Trump. You're going to want Ron DeSantis to come. And so my point is, it's shifted to Tallahassee from Mar-a-Lago. Ron DeSantis is the future, as the New York Post said so eloquently.
Future?
Yeah, the future. Well, I mean, that's, it's the prognostication.
But let me ask you, you're
Rupert.
saying Ron DeSantis, and, Caitlin just said this whole thing on the book. Why isn't it Mike Pence? Is it?
Yeah, so I think, look, I like the vice president. He's an incredibly, he's a good man, nice man, honorable man. That day he stood in the breach and kind of.
So you're saying there's
democracy.
A chance?
Yeah, exactly. Like just the movie. There's always a chance. Look, I mean, that's the beautiful part about elections. Like, right, democracy was on the ballot this time, and the democracy won. We had a huge election, tons of people voting. Democrats are very concerned about, all these the myriad of bad things that could happen, and they didn't. And that's the great part.
Well, my point is, we did the whole thing. Mike Pence has the book coming out, right? He's doing the thing here on CNN, but then you pivoted right to Ron DeSantis. No one is talking about.
Well, listen, there's obviously going to be a lot of people running, right, for president. And as we saw last time, there's a giant field, 16, 17 people. No one thought Donald Trump was going to be the nominee when that started out, right? And that's why they have this process, right? Lieutenant Governor could tell you, when he ran, I'm sure there were a lot of people. He may have been the favorite, may not have been the favorite, but at the end, that's why you have elections.
I thought your interview, I was telling Caitlin this earlier with Caitlin yesterday, was really the interview of the day yesterday. I think what you said was so important for America to hear, for many Republicans to hear. And you talked about not maybe a pivot, but a definite turn and pivot. And I just wonder if a Mike Pence is enough of a pivot for the party, right? Yes, he's writing this now and saying this now. And yes, he did and stood up for the Constitution on that day. It's critically important. But he also stood by the president's side and didn't say things through so many moments during the presidency.
Yeah, there's no way to deny Donald Trump got fired Tuesday night. And the search committee has brought a few names to the top of the list, and Ron DeSantis is one of them. I think Ron DeSantis is being rewarded for a new thought process with Republicans and that solid leadership. Right? We watched that play out in Georgia. Brian Kemp beat the brakes off Stacey Abrams, because he really got to put leadership on display through a pandemic and economic upheaval and whatnot. And in Georgia, I think we're going to watch this play out over the next 4 weeks. My advice, if anybody in the Herschel Walker team wanted to listen, would be to make 3 successful phone calls. One is to tell Donald Trump to stay out of Georgia for 4 weeks. He's toxic and he would do nothing to help the ticket. Secondly, I would pick up the phone and call Brian Kemp and ask him for his help and apologize for not endorsing him during the primary against David Perdue. And third, I'd call Ron DeSantis and ask him to come to Georgia as often as he possibly can the next 4 weeks. That would be a winning recipe for Herschel Walker.
Mike Pence wasn't
That's
in
why he's
any of
lieutenant
those.
governor, right? He's smart.
Mike Pence wasn't in any of those 3 recommendations.
Yeah, I think, look, this is just my opinion. I think Mike Pence has got a difficult, hold a thread because he's got to have to explain the 4 years of being alongside Donald Trump, right? And there's a process there that is an angry and vile process that we're having to move past. I think Republicans are now in a window of opportunity where if we don't actually get stuff done, if we just complain about stuff, right? If we just complain about immigration, if we just complain about healthcare, if we just complain about all of these issues, but don't actually do something, then we've got problem, right? Then 2024 becomes blurred and it doesn't become an easy target. The first 100 days of our Congress, if it's a Donald Trump, wish list, we got problems. But if we go to work for the actual average American that's going to be worried about getting laid off in the next 2 hours, then I think we got a chance to really move the needle.
To Poppy's point and to your point, Brian Kemp stood up to Donald Trump and said, look, the election was not stolen, right? He stood up to Donald Trump. Mike Pence did not do that. He did stand up for the Constitution, but he's going to have a lot to answer to when it comes to what happened with Donald Trump and why he didn't stand up.
There's this, I don't know what's the right term for it, maybe a Trump drag factor. Right? Everybody who's tightly associated with Donald Trump, and we watched it play out all over the country in these races. Certainly watched it play out in Georgia. I mean, the drag factor is tangible. It was, 8 or 9 points between Brian Kemp and Herschel Walker, and we've seen it play out all over the country. The Trump drag factor is real, and it's only getting worse.
And can I just say quickly, because I just double-checked myself, Pence backed Kemp while Trump was backing Perdue in that race. Pence was behind Kemp at the time. David, though, when you talk to other Republicans, I think the question is, we, the royal we, always talk about Trump when something happens as if it's over, his grip on the power is completely gone, his grip on the party. That's not true, clearly, if you watch the primaries. He's got the voters. So is it just bad headlines that Trump will survive ultimately? I
mean, I don't know. This hits a little different than the past, right? And people are saying, well, why not on January 6th? I can't tell you. It's like, it is until it isn't, right? That's this president, how he's operated. And this just feels different. People they don't like losing. Ben Shapiro is out, on social media saying, look, we got to reevaluate. Candace Owens, right? These are Trump
Look at the
loyalists,
Can we
right?
pull up the Wall Street Journal?
Incredible. Wall Street Journal,
the
the
New York
biggest
Post
loser,
is one
right?
thing, but to see the Wall Street Journal editorial board write the Republican Party's biggest loser, I think is right.
It is important, but you know what? There are so many people back in Pennsylvania and Florida and Kentucky and Iowa that are ride or die Trumpers, right? And they're not going to leave this guy. And listen, President Trump has a loyal base of probably right around 30% in the Republican Party that aren't going anywhere until maybe somebody else gives them an alternative or an option. And literally nobody's stepped up yet. So President Trump's going to announce this next coming week. This Governor DeSantis has announced. Vice President Pence hasn't announced. So there is nobody else in the mix as of yet.
You mentioned two of the extremists in the party. You're talking about Ben Shapiro and what's her name,
Candace
Owens, right? But those aren't the people who are deciding elections right now.
No, but those
they may be the loudest voices and the MAGA folks, right? But they're not necessarily the folks who are going to the polls and deciding.
No, but and to your point, Don, friends of mine back in Western Pennsylvania, right? Good friends of mine, they're ride or die Trumpers. I keep sending them information. I say, look, here's what's happened. They're like, David, do you really believe the president lost? I said, yeah, he lost. And I'd like him to win. I wish the guy would have won in 2020, but let me explain to you how he lost. And they're like, no, you're wrong. And even this past, on election day, they're giving me anecdotes about people being sent extra ballots and look how bad things are. And I'm like, those are just anecdotal, and I run them down and fact check them and try to help them. But you can't persuade them. They're not persuadable.
You think he'll announce?
Yeah, I think former president's going to run for a variety of reasons, right?
You think he should run?
Look, it's America. Everyone gets a chance to run, right?